Keanu Reeves arrived at his new villa. He was expecting a peaceful start to this new chapter in his life. But instead, he stumbled upon a scene that made his blood run cold, a wealthy neighbor, oozing entitlement, cruelly mistreating his defenseless dog. What this man didn't realize was that Keanu wasn't just any bystander. He wasn't someone who turned a blind eye. And he definitely wasn't the type to let something like this slide. The sleek black car glided smoothly through the pristine streets of the Silverwood neighborhood, its tinted windows reflecting the perfectly manicured lawns and grand estates that stretched along the road. Inside, Keanu Reeves sat in quiet contemplation, fingers absent-mindedly tracing the leather armrest as he took in the view. The morning air was crisp, carrying with it the fresh scent of possibility, the feeling of a new beginning. As the car approached his villa, Keanu rolled down the window, letting the cool breeze ruffle his hair. He had owned this place for over a decade, yet it had always been a distant investment, just another line in a rental contract, another property on a management report. But now, for the first time, he was here in person, ready to turn this house into something more than just an asset. He was ready to make it a home. The soft vibration of his phone pulled him from his thoughts. He glanced at the screen. A message from Patrick, his longtime assistant. With a small smile, Keanu tapped the call button, bringing the phone to his ear. "Good morning, Keanu," Patrick's voice filled the car, warm yet professional, carrying the familiarity of years spent working side by side. "I wanted to check in about the villa. I had the staff deep clean it all week. It should be spotless, like a 5-star hotel by now." Keanu chuckled softly. "Appreciate it, Patrick, but you know I don't need it to feel like a hotel. I want it to feel like home." A pause. Then, the knowing smile in Patrick's voice was almost audible. "That's exactly what I meant. A space that feels personal. Not just another cold, impersonal suite." Keanu nodded slightly, looking out at the grand villa as the car pulled up to the gate. "I appreciate that, man. Really." "Listen," Patrick hesitated, then added, "if you want, I can come by. Be on standby, help you settle in. You know I don't mind." Keanu shook his head, even though Patrick couldn't see him. "No need for that. I've got a butler here, and I can handle things myself. But thanks, means a lot." A light chuckle came from the other end of the line. "Keanu, you never change." A pause. "Anyway, call me if you need anything. Anytime." As the call ended, Keanu found himself smiling. The ornate gate swung open with a soft hum, and the car rolled up the long driveway. His heart kicked up just a little, not from nerves, but from something that felt a lot like excitement. The villa stood before him, finally his in a way it had never been before. A Mediterranean-inspired beauty, standing apart from the sleek, modern mansions that defined Beverly Hills. Warm terracotta roof tiles glowed in the morning sun, complementing the soft cream of the stucco walls. Wrought iron balconies draped in vines gave the place an old-world charm, while the large windows promised bright, open spaces inside. The car door opened, and Keanu stepped out, stretching slightly as he took in his surroundings. As he admired the villa, a tall, sharply dressed man approached with the kind of effortless grace that only came with years of high-end service. "Welcome, Mr. Reeves," the man said with a slight bow, his voice smooth and cultured. "I'm Malvin, your butler. The staff and I are honored to have you here. The maids are ready to assist with your luggage whenever you wish to go inside." Keanu nodded in appreciation. Malvin carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had seen everything and was unfazed by it all. But the thought of disappearing into the house just yet didn't sit right. The morning was too perfect, and something about the neighborhood called to him. "Thank you, Malvin," Keanu said, his voice warm. "I think I'll take a stroll first while it's still cool. Could you have my bags taken to my room? And my clothes ironed and placed in the wardrobe?" "Of course, sir," Malvin responded smoothly, gesturing to the waiting staff. Keanu exhaled slowly, shoving his hands into his pockets as he turned toward the quiet street. "A walk first." Then, maybe, he'd finally step inside and see what it felt like to truly belong here. But just as he started down the sidewalk, something caught his eye. Or rather, someone. A man, dressed in a designer suit, standing outside a neighboring estate. His voice carried down the street, sharp, impatient. And at his feet, cowering under the weight of that anger, was a small dog. Keanu's jaw tightened. Yeah. Maybe this stroll wasn't going to be so peaceful after all. Say, head of the neighborhood association, in fact. We like to keep things orderly around here. His smile widened, but there was an edge to it, something practiced, something that didn't quite sit right. Keanu offered a polite nod, though his focus remained on the trembling dog at Graham's feet. Rusty, as he was apparently called, had shrunk back, his ears flattened, his body languaged screaming fear. Keanu had seen that kind of posture before, not just in dogs, but in people. It wasn't the behavior of a difficult rescue. It was the behavior of something, or someone, who had learned that pain followed disobedience. Graham seemed to notice Keanu's lingering gaze and gave the leash a little tug, forcing Rusty to straighten up. Don't worry about him. He's just nervous around new people, he said with an easy chuckle, though his grip on the leash tightened. Takes time to break old habits, you know? Keanu didn't miss the choice of words. A silence stretched between them for a beat too long before Graham clapped his hands together, shifting gears once again. Well, I won't keep you. Just wanted to say hello, welcome you to the neighborhood properly. If you ever need anything, recommendations, security concerns, local gossip, you just let me know. He winked. We look out for our own here. Keanu gave a small, measured smile, the kind that revealed nothing. Appreciate that. Graham nodded, satisfied, and with a quick come on, Rusty, he turned and strode back down the sidewalk, his gait easy, his presence confident. But Keanu's eyes remained locked on the dog, on the way Rusty hesitated for just a second, just long enough for Keanu to see the resignation in his soft brown eyes, before obediently falling in line beside his owner. Keanu exhaled slowly, watching as Graham disappeared around the corner. Something about that man was off. And Keanu had a feeling this wasn't the last time he'd be seeing him. Balance. It was clear Graham wanted to steer the topic away from Rusty, and while Keanu wasn't one to jump to conclusions, everything about this interaction set off quiet alarms in his mind. The forced politeness, the barely concealed flashes of temper, the dog's clear signs of distress, it all pointed to something Keanu couldn't just ignore. Still, he knew pushing Graham in this moment wouldn't get him anywhere. People like him, charming, calculated, used to controlling narratives, were skilled at slipping away from confrontation. Instead, Keanu simply nodded, filing away every detail in the back of his mind. That sounds interesting, he said carefully, keeping his tone even. I'll see if I can make it. Graham beamed, his previous tension seemingly melting away. Wonderful. I'll make sure to send you all the details. It'll be a great way to get to know everyone. And trust me, you'll love it here. Silverwood has a way of feeling like home. Keanu offered a small, noncommittal smile. Looking forward to it. With that, Graham gave Rusty's leash another sharp tug, more forceful than necessary, and turned on his heel, striding away with the same self-assured air he had arrived with. Rusty hesitated for a fraction of a second, his weary eyes flicking up toward Keanu, before reluctantly following his owner, his steps slow, his posture stiff with unease. Keanu watched them go, a heaviness settling in his chest. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. A sound so faint it might have been mistaken for the wind rustling through the trees. But Keanu knew better. His fingers stilled over his phone screen, his entire body tuning in. Another whimper followed, this time slightly louder, carrying with it a distinct note of distress. Keanu set his phone down and stood, moving toward the open windows that led out to the garden. His villa was spacious, designed for privacy, and the high stone walls that enclosed the property muffled most outside noises. But this sound, it was close. Too close. He stepped onto the terrace, the warmth of the morning sun brushing against his skin as he scanned the perfectly manicured grounds. At first, there was nothing. Just the gentle swaying of the trees and the distant hum of traffic from beyond the gates of Silverwood. Then, a movement near the hedge. Keanu narrowed his eyes. A small shape, barely visible through the foliage, was curled up near the base of the wall. A dog. His heart kicked up. It was Rusty. Keanu didn't hesitate. He moved swiftly, crossing the garden in long strides, his pulse steady but alert. As he approached, he saw the full extent of the dog's condition up close. Rusty was trembling, his ribs far too prominent beneath his short, rough coat. His breathing was uneven, and his once soft eyes were glassy with fear. The heavy leash was still clipped to his collar, but it trailed limply along the grass, as if he had broken free or had been discarded like an afterthought. Keanu crouched down, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "Hey, buddy," he murmured, his voice low and soothing. Rusty's ears twitched, but he didn't lift his head. His entire body remained curled inward, a protective posture of a dog who had learned the world was not kind. Keanu's jaw tightened. He didn't know exactly what had happened, but one thing was certain: Graham was involved. And whatever had taken place between then and now had led Rusty here, terrified and alone. Keanu extended a hand, letting Rusty catch his scent. The dog's nose quivered, his muscles tense, but after a long moment, he didn't pull away. Slowly, cautiously, Keanu brushed his fingers over Rusty's head. The dog flinched at first, but didn't recoil. Keanu exhaled, his expression softening. "You're safe now," he said quietly. He didn't know what kind of trouble this was going to bring. He didn't know what Graham's reaction would be when he realized his rescue dog had gone missing. But one thing was clear. Keanu Reeves wasn't going to let Rusty go back. Inviting Malvin to elaborate. The butler hesitated for a brief moment, his hands adjusting an already perfectly aligned lampshade as if stalling for time. Then, lowering his voice slightly, he said, "Mr. Whitlock is well regarded in the community, but there have been whispers, sir." Keanu's sharp gaze remained fixed on him. "Whispers?" Malvin cleared his throat, choosing his words with the precision of a man who had spent decades navigating the delicate balance of discretion and duty. "Nothing official, of course. But the staff at neighboring estates talk. And some of them, they've expressed concern about the way Mr. Whitlock handles his animals. Rusty isn't the first dog he's owned, you see. There were others." Keanu felt a chill settle in his chest. What happened to them? Malvin's expression remained carefully composed, but there was something dark flickering behind his eyes. "They disappeared, sir." Keanu's jaw tightened. "There were rumors," Malvin continued, lowering his voice even further, "that some of the dogs ended up in shelters. Severely malnourished. Frightened. But no one ever had proof of direct mistreatment. And Mr. Whitlock is a man with influence. He knows how to protect his reputation." Keanu exhaled slowly, his mind working through the implications. It wasn't just Rusty. There had been others. And if he didn't do something, there could be more. He met Malvin's gaze. "If you hear or see anything at all, I want to know." Malvin nodded once. "Of course, sir." Keanu didn't need to say more. He turned and headed toward the door, his thoughts already forming the next steps. He had dealt with Hollywood's finest liars, with people who built their entire careers on facades, but this was different. This was cruelty hidden behind a mask of enlightenment. And Keanu Reeves wasn't about to let it continue. But in personal decor, each space a reflection of a man more concerned with status than comfort. The deeper they moved into the mansion, the more Keanu's unease grew. He wasn't just here to socialize, he was here to observe, to listen, and, if necessary, to act. As they stepped out onto the expansive backyard terrace, a curated scene of wealth and exclusivity unfolded before him. Guests milled about in designer outfits, sipping on expensive champagne, engaged in conversations filled with performative laughter and strategic networking. Waitstaff moved seamlessly through the crowd, offering canapes on silver trays. A jazz quartet played softly in the corner, the music polished, controlled, much like everything else in Graham's world. Keanu allowed his gaze to drift, subtly scanning the area. He noted a cluster of people near a grand buffet table, others gathered by a lavish outdoor bar. But his real focus was elsewhere, on the shaded corner of the yard, where a wrought iron fence separated the main party area from what looked like a private garden. And that's where he saw him. Rusty. The dog was tethered to a short chain near a shaded kennel, positioned just out of sight from the main gathering. From this distance, Keanu could make out the same defeated posture, the slight tremble in the Ridgeback's legs. Rusty wasn't just left out of the party, he was being hidden. Graham followed his gaze, his smile tightening. "Ah, I see you've spotted Rusty," he said, his tone light but forced. "I had to separate him from the guests. Some people are uncomfortable around big dogs, you understand." Keanu turned to face him, his expression unreadable. "He doesn't seem to be enjoying the party much," he said, keeping his voice even. Graham chuckled, a practiced sound devoid of real amusement. "Oh, he's just adjusting, still getting used to all this. Rescue dogs, you know. Always a process." Keanu didn't respond right away, instead allowing the weight of silence to settle between them. He had spent years reading people, knowing when someone was bluffing, when they were hiding something. And right now, Graham Whitlock was hiding a lot. Before Graham could steer the conversation away, Keanu casually asked, "Mind if I say hello to him?" Something flickered across Graham's face, something sharp, almost irritated, but it was gone in an instant. "Of course," he said smoothly. "But don't expect much interaction. He's not very sociable." Keanu didn't wait for further permission. He moved toward Rusty, feeling Graham's eyes on him the entire way. As he approached, the dog flinched, his body tensing as if bracing for something. Keanu slowed his movements, crouching down at a careful distance. "Hey, buddy," he murmured. Rusty's ears twitched, but he didn't move closer. Keanu extended a hand, letting the dog get a sense of him, of his intentions. Rusty hesitated, his tail still tucked tight, but there was a glimmer of something in his wary eyes, hope, maybe. Keanu's jaw tightened as he took in the details up close. The too tight collar. The patches of missing fur. The subtle, nervous shuddering. This wasn't just neglect. This was fear. And Keanu Reeves wasn't about to let it continue. Behind him, Graham's voice carried through the crisp afternoon air. "You see? Not exactly the friendliest dog," he said with a forced chuckle. "Told you he was a handful." Keanu slowly stood, turning to face him. He didn't say anything at first, just held the man's gaze, letting the silence stretch long enough to make Graham shift ever so slightly. Then, finally, Keanu spoke. "Maybe he just needs to be around the right kind of people." Graham's smile twitched, but he said nothing. Keanu had seen enough. And this wasn't over. Bowl, no trace of sustenance, only dry, compacted dirt beneath Rusty's trembling paws. The dog was barely holding himself up, his breath coming in short, uneven pants, his tail pressed so tightly between his legs that it was nearly invisible. Keanu crouched slowly, his movements deliberate, ensuring he didn't startle Rusty any further. "Hey, buddy," he murmured, his voice gentle, soothing. Rusty flinched at the sound, his entire body shrinking inward, as if expecting another blow. Keanu clenched his jaw, rage simmering beneath his calm exterior. Whatever had happened to this dog in the last few hours had been brutal. He extended his hand, palm open, letting Rusty catch his scent. The dog hesitated, his body language screaming fear, but after a long, agonizing pause, his nose twitched. Keanu stayed perfectly still, allowing Rusty to make the decision. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the dog shifted slightly forward, his wet nose barely grazing Keanu's fingertips. It was a small act of trust, fragile, hesitant, But there. Keanu exhaled slowly. That's it, he murmured. You're not alone. Rusty let out another weak whimper, his body still rigid with uncertainty. But Keanu had seen enough. He wasn't leaving this dog behind. Carefully, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, quickly texting Patrick. I need an emergency vet. No questions. Send someone discreet. Now. He hit send, his heart hammering. He knew time was running out, Rusty needed help, and he needed it fast. But before he could figure out his next move, a shadow fell over him. Mr. Reeves. The voice was smooth, dangerously calm. Keanu felt the tension in the air shift before he even looked up. Graham Whitlock stood above him, his expression a perfect mask of polite curiosity, but his eyes were cold. You seem to have wandered off, Graham said, his tone light, but his posture stiff. I must admit, I didn't expect to find you here. Keanu slowly rose to his feet, positioning himself slightly in front of Rusty without making it obvious. He met Graham's gaze evenly, refusing to look away. I heard something, Keanu said simply. Thought I'd check it out. Graham let out a quiet chuckle, though there was no humor in it. Ah, that's just Rusty. He's a bit dramatic. Rescue dogs, you know how they are. Keanu didn't blink. Dramatic? His voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable edge beneath it. He looks like he's barely holding himself together. Graham's smile faltered for the briefest moment before he shrugged. He's a work in progress. Some dogs take more discipline than others. Keanu's fists clenched at his sides. Discipline. That's what men like Graham called cruelty. A silence stretched between them, heavy, charged. Keanu could feel the weight of Graham's scrutiny, the calculation behind his gaze. This was a man who wasn't used to being questioned. Finally, Graham sighed, running a hand through his carefully styled hair. Listen, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone, I get it. You're an animal lover. That's admirable. But you don't understand this dog, he's a problem case. Dangerous, even. Keanu glanced down at Rusty, who was curled into himself, too weak to even stand properly. Dangerous? The idea was laughable. He took a slow step forward, just enough to make Graham stiffen ever so slightly. You ever owned a dog before, Graham? Keanu asked, his voice quiet but firm. Graham blinked, caught off guard. Excuse me? A real dog, Keanu clarified. One you actually cared for. Graham's jaw tightened. For the first time, there was a flicker of something beyond calculated charm, something darker, more unsettled. Keanu didn't break eye contact. Because if you had, you'd know that fear and obedience aren't the same thing. A muscle ticked in Graham's cheek. For the first time since arriving at this event, Keanu felt the power shift. And he wasn't backing down. Rusty had been left without food, water, or even a puddle to drink from. Desperate to help, Keanu spotted a garden hose nearby, but as he reached for it, Rusty flinched, pressing himself against the pole in fear. Realizing the hose had likely been used as a tool for punishment, Keanu instead cupped water in his hands, gently helping Rusty drink until his thirst was quenched. Stroking the trembling dog's ears, he whispered, "Hang in there, buddy. I won't let them make you compete in that obstacle course. We're getting you out of here." Before he could continue, a shadow loomed over him. Graham had appeared, his expression a thinly veiled mask of anger. "Lost your way to the bathroom?" he sneered. Keanu stood, positioning himself between Graham and Rusty. His voice was low and firm. "What the hell are you doing to your dog? He's malnourished, wounded." Graham dismissed the concern, repeating his rehearsed excuse. Rusty was a difficult rescue. Keanu mentioned the dog's fear of the hose, and Graham's facade cracked. "That mutt's never listened since I brought it home," he snapped. "It doesn't even appreciate being rescued." His tone was cold, void of empathy. "It's just a dog, it gets the treatment it earns." Keanu's mind reeled at the stark contrast between Graham's self-help guru persona and the cruelty he inflicted behind closed doors. When asked why he even adopted Rusty, Graham scoffed. "My daughter wanted a dog, something cute. But I saw an opportunity. Having a rescue made me look compassionate. It was good PR." Keanu's stomach churned with disgust. So Rusty was just a prop? Graham smirked. And now he's a useless burden. Keanu had heard enough. "This ends now," he said. "Rusty isn't competing in your little spectacle." Graham laughed coldly. "It's just entertainment. No one here cares." Keanu's eyes darkened. "If you go through with it, I'll expose you." Graham's laughter grew. "Expose me to whom? This neighborhood? They love me. They stay silent because of my influence." Keanu glanced toward the party, realizing with dismay how many of these well-dressed people had likely turned a blind eye. But he wasn't going to be silent. He pulled out his phone and called 911, but without immediate proof of abuse, authorities wouldn't intervene. Graham smirked. "See? A waste of time." Then, with a dismissive wave, he added, "If you want the mutt, take it. It's worthless to me now." Keanu clenched his jaw. Rusty needed more than just rescue. Graham needed to face justice. But for now, getting the dog to safety was the priority. "This isn't over," Keanu promised. Graham's voice dripped with mockery. "Try your best, Reeves." Keanu ignored him, unhooked Rusty's chain, and secured a rope leash around his neck. The dog hesitated but followed Keanu as they walked through the party. Whispers spread among the guests, their eyes tracking the Hollywood star and the frail dog at his side. Back at the villa, Keanu gently carried Rusty inside. The staff looked on in silent shock but quickly composed themselves. Malvin stepped forward. "Sir, how can we assist?" Keanu acted fast. He ordered warm bathwater, nutritious food, medical supplies, and a soft bed for Rusty. Then, he called Martin, a trusted friend who ran an animal shelter. "I just rescued a neglected dog," Keanu explained. Martin promised immediate care and a vet checkup. As Rusty settled into the warm bath, he trembled at first but gradually relaxed under Keanu's gentle touch. The grime and knots washed away, revealing a dog who had suffered yet still had the strength to trust. "You're safe now," Keanu murmured. "No one's ever going to hurt you again." Once clean and dry, Rusty hesitantly approached his new bed, sniffing before curling up. Keanu sat beside him, stroking his fur. "Tomorrow, we'll get you checked out. But for now, rest." As Rusty drifted into sleep, Keanu knew this fight wasn't over. Graham needed to be held accountable, and the community's silence had to be broken. What started as a peaceful retreat had become something far greater, a mission for justice.